So I just made a couple of videos about self-care, specifically crying as self-care. And now I'd like to make a video about one of the very painful, tough love Loki lessons that I had when I first started working with Loki. I was only about 4 months in. We were healing lots of trauma, most of it from my mom. And I had pretty much healed most of it at this point, 4 months in. I might have even healed all of it by then. I'm not even sure, but I was still a mess. I was an absolute mess. And clearly, there were things to be done. And one of the very, very most painful times came around then. It might have been less than 4 months. But anyway, it was early in the day. I could feel Loki calling me to my iPad to get a message through music. I was like, get the music, get the music. I could hear that. So I did. I put my entire library on scramble. And the song came up, U2, The Troubles, from the album Songs of Innocence. An album that very mysteriously just appeared on my iPad. I never bought that one. I had other YouTube albums. I did not have that one. I believe it was during the year my mother was living with me. Yikes. From the fall of fall of 2017 to the fall of 2018. It just appeared on my iPad, and I actually listened to it a lot in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep, and I was just like beyond stressed, just out of my mind crazy. But anyway, making this video far longer than it needs to be. So, Loki plays the song or chooses the song The Troubles from this album, and right off the bat, I'm like just getting upset, and it even starts off with, somebody stepped inside your soul, little by little they robbed and stole, till someone else was in control. And I'm like starting to cry, right, just listening to this song, and I've heard it before, but now all of a sudden the meaning of it is hitting me, and I'm like, yeah, this is what my mother did to me, and I can feel him like going, no, Loki's saying no, and I'm like, really, she did this to me, and it's like, that's not what I mean. And somebody else did it. What, my husband? No, somebody else did it to you, and a little bit of guessing, and I'm like, what, you stole my soul? And I got the most like snarky sort of, yeah, and I totally lost it. I was so hurt. I felt so betrayed, and it was the first time I actually really felt betrayed by him, and he had been giving me tough love all along. It was getting increasingly tougher. And I think that was the very first extremely painful lesson, where I wasn't actively doing like inner child work and shadow work and stuff like that. And so yeah, I cried hysterically. I might have cried like for the better part of 36 hours. And it wasn't just crying too. It like sent me back into the darkest places in my mind, and shadow work really hadn't been going on, so there was a lot of dark stuff there, and I spent, like I said, about a day and a half in that place, and crying, and then somehow I got to a point, and miraculously I felt better. I felt healed. I felt like I regained control of my soul. And that's not why I was crying. I was crying because it hurt me that he was saying that to me. That's what hurt. It wasn't that I gave over, right, control to him. And I did. I mean, when people who work with Loki know, he's infectious. It's like, like a brand new love affair almost, or maybe worse. Maybe worse. Maybe more intense, maybe more codependent. Maybe that's not the right word. Anyway, I didn't realize it then that crying was part of the point. I realize it now, looking back, almost over 2 years. It's been 2 years of working with him, but the really harsh stuff, like I said, didn't start until about 8 weeks in or so. And I look back over the better part of the 2 years, and I'm like, making me cry was definitely a big point of all of these tough love lessons. And the crying was a big part of the healing. It felt miraculous. It even came along with like acceptance of what he did, right? Because it seemed unduly cruel, like it didn't need to go down that way, did it? Yeah, so that's my story. I also want to say that like that album, U2 Songs of Innocence, was released in 2014, mysteriously showed up on my iPad like in 2017. I have a feeling I understand now how that mysteriously showed up on my iPad. There's another song on that album, Cedarwood Road. Any of you had troubled teen years? That song, very meaningful, very, very meaningful. So give it a listen if you like U2. And definitely add crying to your list of self-care. It's really important that we learn to cry as things happen, right? When that little hurt happens, or the big hurt happens, when it happens, that's when the crying needs to take place. It could take place, embarrass yourself so much, like it doesn't matter. Oh wow, I'm gonna make this video even longer. When I was in college the first time, I have 2 bachelors, whack job, what's wrong with me? Anyway, the first one was in music, and I wasn't particularly talented. I worked so hard and to become competent, right? And you know what? I didn't have grand dreams. I wanted to be a college professor teaching music theory, piano class, and private classical guitar lessons. And I could have done that if it wasn't for a car accident, but that's another story. My last semester, I was like forced to take this class with the other guitar teacher, and he wanted to turn it into like a place to practice performing, right? I don't know what the class was supposed to be, but that's what he wanted to do. And so I had been working on Bach's suite, and I wanted to play the prelude from the suite. There wasn't enough time to do the whole suite. And I'd been working on it for a long time. I was close to performance ready with this piece. And so, but I always got nervous, very nervous. And so I played it for the class, and I played it pretty well. I was feeling, pretty good about how I did. And like almost immediately after the sound of the last note died away, people hadn't even started to clap yet, and the professor starts screaming at me, screaming. He's like screaming, "You can't change Bach. You can't change the notes to Bach." What he was objecting to is I didn't like the editing that was common. It was written for cello, not guitar, and the common editing was done in a style that was not a style Bach would have done. So I changed it, the harmony a little bit. Instead of thirds and sixths, I put octaves and fifths, which is what Bach would have done. And it actually was much closer to the actual cello manuscript that Bach wrote. I looked it up. I went to the library, and so that's what he's screaming at me about. But the thing is, the stress of performing and how much it meant to me, and he's yelling at me in front of my classmates, right? I just started crying hysterically. I mean, normally I would just hold that sort of shit in, but I started crying hysterically. And actually, I think it helped me start healing from that event before the event was even over, right? I was being horribly abused, and I allowed myself, probably because I was in a vulnerable position, to cry the moment it started, right? The moment the abuse started, I started crying. And I think, looking back, that's really like a horrible thing, but that is not on my list of like stuff I need to heal from. And it's more of an amusing story, right? I find it amusing. And I'm pretty sure now that I have this understanding that it's because I allowed myself to cry regardless of the embarrassment, right? And why should we be embarrassed? What he did was horrible. And it didn't take me more than 24 hours to find out that all of my classmates did not lose respect for me, right? They all like reached out to me and was like, yeah, what an asshole, right? And telling me that I played well. So, yeah, we need to let it happen like that. We need to cry in the moment and not be concerned about being vulnerable, because you know what? More people will support you than you think. And even if they don't, screw them, right? You're doing what you need. You need to do that, right? For your own sanity, your own health, right? And your own happiness. Okay, so cry and have a wonderful day.